Hey everyone, this is Ben Bredigan here with onX. We're excited to have all of you here tonight. We are going to be talking about hunting waterfowl in the Northwest, and with us we've got Cody and Eric here from Born and Raised Calco and the Flyway. So really excited to have you. I pre-screened some of this information and it's killer. So really looking forward to it. Couple of housekeeping things before we get kicked off. If you haven't joined one of our webinars yet, just a reminder that your video is turned off and you're muted, so we can't hear you. If you want to interact, ask questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. Also, if there's any onX questions, you can email help@onxmaps.com. And this will also be available on YouTube probably tomorrow if you want to go back and reference some more material. So I'll kick things off and introduce Cody and Eric here, guys. Thanks for having us, and I'm excited to learn myself from all your waterfowl knowledge. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, super excited to be here. I mean, working with onX, had the opportunity to do some other webinars, meat care and elk calling stuff, and when you guys came to on the waterfowl stuff, it's like couldn't jump on here fast enough. So
Yeah,
my name's Cody Kellum.
My name's Eric. Thanks again. Yeah, we're excited to be here and excited to talk to you guys tonight, and hopefully everyone's having a good start to their waterfowl season. I know we're kind of crying the blues a little bit. It's pretty warm, pretty mild right now, but we're waiting on the first cold snap.
Yeah, yeah. Coming off,
it'd be interesting. Oh, I'd say it'd be interesting to see where everyone's from. If you want to throw in the chat function, we'd love to see where all you guys are calling in from. Oh yeah, all over the place.
Kansas, Illinois, Missoula, Astoria, Nebraska, all sorts, all over. Love it.
Yeah. So what have you guys been up to? We'll give a little bit here before let people kind of trickle on. So what does the season look like for you guys so far? How has it been?
So we actually kicked off this year up in Canada. After we got done with elk season, we went to Canada in October and primarily hunted snow geese. We went up there, we're like, hey, we're gonna hunt what's there, but we caught the front end of the snow geese showing up, and then also front end of the ducks. Big Canadas, little Canadas, a few, not many around. No specs. We killed two specs in the whole week, but yeah, we got home, did a little bit of waterfowl hunting now, getting blinds ready, kind of waiting for the first push. But Cody went down to one of our favorite wildlife areas and did a few days there, testing out we just acquired a new boat called the Marsh Rat. And so we've been playing around with that a bunch, but really kind of waiting on go. We're going to start pretty hard this next week. And we got Project Flyway going, which if you want to talk about that, it's kind
of we're pretty excited filming 5 states, couple countries, dragging a trailer all around, giving away a trailer fully decked out, blinds, decoys, guns, waders, kind of the whole gamut.
We just put a go fast camper on it.
Go fast camper rooftop tent on it. So kind of the refuge warrior all decked out. And so we're going to actually kick that off tomorrow on our Flyway channel with the first video from Canada. So pretty excited. And like Eric said, we got a chance to hunt a little bit here in Oregon so far, but kind of waiting for the push. And we really, in Western Oregon especially, don't really kick off things till, our first push usually 10th of November to the 15th, 1st to 10th, somewhere in there. And then really Thanksgiving on is when we start holding ducks and getting fresh birds coming in. We hunt a lot of sheetwater stuff. So as the rainfall comes, things start flooding out. Got a chance to hunt cacklers the first period opener. And they shot them up pretty good. So just chomping at the bit for more time behind the gun and working the dogs.
Love it. Yeah, it sounds great. So we'll kick things off here in a second. Another topic here is we've got giveaways. We've got some new onX shirts, as well as we're giving away a Game Changer single read call. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Game Changer call. Yeah.
We'll post a link in the chat here, and we'll have that periodically through the chat, so you'll be able to sign up as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here, and we can kind of kick things off. You
Awesome.
Got my screen? Everyone can see it?
Yeah, we're sitting there good.
Looking good.
Heck yeah.
You want to go to the first slide there?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. So starting things off, this is going to be a quick rundown for us. I say quick because we could probably talk about this for hours and hours on end, but we're going to go through kind of the three pillars that I think and Tony and I believe make a successful waterfowl hunter. Those being e-scouting, gathering intel, scouting. Scouting is super, super critical. Whether you're hunting public or private, scouting plays a pivotal role in your success. And then the other being, of course, your setup. What do we need to do to be successful once we actually find the spot, choose our location, where are we going to hunt, now what? And then the last part of it being calling, motion, the decoy spread, and then how to read birds. So those are kind of our three pillars of.
Yeah, and I think on that first one too, I think one thing to add, and I really picked this up with Eric over the years, is figuring out those patterns, right? Weather patterns, what feed they're on during certain times of the year based on temperature, and really kind of dialing that in. So that e-scouting, gathering intel, scouting, I think is one of the critical things that a lot of people might kind of put on the back burner, and they just try to get in the field and get some killed, and you're kind of hoping in a prayer. And I think building that base and that foundation is key to get continual success. So,
yeah. And like as far as our approach to scouting here in this webinar, I'm more or less going to come from the approach of like I'm finding a new area or an area that I haven't hunted a whole bunch, and how we're going to pick that apart. Say Cody and I arrive somewhere and we got a couple trucks. How are we going to figure out where we want to go, where we want to scout? We kind of just put an X on the map and went for it. And the first thing is going to be like, how do I identify a flyway? First thing I look for are main drainages, and drainages. We're not talking mountain drainages. We're talking like river drainages, creek drainages. Birds follow water, and so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of any desert type area or area without water. We're gonna focus on areas with water, and basically what flyways are they gonna hopefully be using. And then second, this is kind of the big one. Locate those refuges and locate those roosts, and we're constantly looking for big bodies of water, big sloughs, river systems, creeks. I mean, that's
yep.
Yeah.
And then
what constitutes in your mind a big body of water?
So to me, like anything that I think could hold ducks overnight or geese overnight, it could be a 10-acre pond, it could be a 1,000-acre lake, but hopefully it's an area that is undisturbed. And you bring up a good point. It could also be, especially for geese, it could be a city, it could be a town, it could be areas with soccer fields, baseball fields, large green spaces, golf courses. Yeah, I'm looking for areas that are going to hold birds that aren't going to be harassed. Roosts,
industrial ponds.
Exactly. Roosts are going to be areas that I'm hopefully not worried about hunting pressure, because I don't want those birds getting hunted before they leave.
Yeah, and a big thing too, like keep in your back pocket some of those industrial ponds. A lot of they're doing cooling cycles and stuff with the water, so they're actually a lot of those ponds won't freeze up or freeze up later. So those are some things to look for when they're doing that water exchange and taking hot water, dumping it in there, and starting that process. And then the second is kind of the feed side of it, right? Where are those birds going out to feed? So you got a good roost located. Now, what are they feeding on, and where are those feeds at? So
actually, one layer that we used quite a bit, we're starting to use more and more, is if you turn on a layer that shows your ag cycles and like what's being planted, you can also, I've used that quite a bit to see what's in the area for
crop.
ag.
Yeah, the crop data later.
Yeah, and I like that as well, especially when you're going to a new area for the first time. I'll go find those big bodies of water, and then I'll flip on the crop layers, because a lot of the time, for at least in my area, corn is kind of king, right? So I'll find areas that, who cares if it's planted this year in corn? At least I know they're planting corn there, versus maybe some less productive like wheat or potatoes or whatever. You go to an area, you're like, damn, this is not. I saw there were fields on the map, but this is not the good stuff. So just to give you an idea of if you're even in the right ballpark and before you hone in.
Yeah, and the other one, critical layer on onX, talk through it, is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service layer. I believe that's under Land and Access. Yeah, USFWS hunt areas. Click that on. You can then see, when you're looking at a state, okay, there's refuges in this travel corridor. There's refuges in that one. You can kind of dial in those flyways a little bit better as well.
Yeah, and maybe you'll talk about this later, but another thing is I'll flip on, if you guys haven't seen it, I know you guys have, but if people are listening, recent imagery.
Oh, yeah.
For a lot of the times, I mean, you can use other data, but in terms of looking at water levels, drought, that kind of thing, I can't tell you how many times I've went to a new area and be like, man, this is not what it looks like on the map. So I'll flip that on e-scouting, just say, okay, yep, there's water here, there's ponds full.
Cody just used that just last week or 2 weeks ago on this refuge system you can hunt. That's 30,000 acres.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, there's water, but where is it? So you turn on the recent imagery and you can then tell, because it's super hard to get a good idea of what's out there because it's all just flat marshland. But then you can actually see your
yeah. And year to year they'll change sumps, and flood one and keep, let the other one dry out. So definitely critical for that recent imagery.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't seen that, it's in the bottom right corner. You click on your map layers where you'd switch to hybrid or topo. Click that down below. You'll see you can toggle on and off recent imagery. So
this is the next bullet point is probably, in my opinion, the most important. Once I've actually figured out where I want to scout, hopefully we're starting to find birds. Now it's like gaining access to private ground or finding public ground. It could be a small little sliver. It could be a public hunting area. But all of a sudden now we're trying to find, okay, where are we going to hunt once we've found those birds? And yeah, it's probably one of the most important tools I use on a daily basis.
Yeah. The huge difference from going back to the old plat maps for county to figure out farmer's name, being able to track that down is definitely critical, like I said, on the private side of it. And then on the public, with that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, checking what is the no hunt areas and what are the actual hunt areas. So you have that data knowing, okay, I see birds here. Oh, that's the refuge resting, and dialing that in. So
a quick little cheat code too is if you gain access to a piece of farmland and all of a sudden you see it's ABC farming, you can look and all of a sudden they may not have told you, but they might own 5 different farms. And all of a sudden you start looking at that same landowner owns lots of different ground. I've gone back several times like, hey, I noticed you guys own one 4 miles from here. Is that the same place? Oh yeah, that's us. You can go and hunt that too. So it definitely helps for getting access.
Yeah, and on that point, if you're on the web map, you can use the search feature, and it will populate it'll put pins on the map of all the different lands that landowner owns, which is super helpful to your point, find those adjacent properties.
I just learned something because I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. But yeah, talk about roads and
the big thing is like, okay, you got to figure it out where you're going to go, how are you getting in there, whether it's via road, ATV access, pushing a cart, whether you're launching a boat, getting those ahead of time before the morning when you're trying to figure it out in the dark. So a lot of times in that scouting process, we're figuring out like, okay, where do we drive in on the field here? Where do we launch the boat? What does that channel look like getting in there? Trying to get all these questions answered ahead of time before you're actually in the morning. Because how many times you're trying to figure it out, people are asking, your hunting buddies like, what are we doing? And you're trying to figure it out. Like, try to get ahead of that so you don't have that stressful morning. You're not setting up when the birds are, that first half magic hour. Or so try to get that dialed in as much as you can. We always talk about waypoints are free. Be organized when you make a waypoint. And really dial that in. This is truck access. This is a field access point. This is where we're going to walk in, and that, and take pictures so and reference what it looks like. You may not hunt that spot year to year. Maybe it's every 2 or 3 years. You can kind of jog your memory there when you're going through that process.
In Canada, I used my tracks as much as I could. Once we had a field we're hunting, and then I'd track all the way back to camp. And then I'd also use the new function, at least new to me. I started using that. Where you plot your route.
Oh, build route.
Yeah, so I build a route because sometimes I was going the long way. I didn't even realize it, but there's a faster route to get there. So I'd go ahead and build a route and shave 7 minutes off my drive in the morning. So that helped a lot.
And then in that first period is like, what's the other hunting pressure around when you're out scouting? Are you seeing other guys scout? What does that look like? Are you hearing shots? Trying to kind of track to figure out what are you by yourself, or are you going to be in a high traffic area with a lot of pressure?
Usually the closer to town, the more pressure.
Yeah,
seems to be. Another big portion of scouting is there's a lot of scouting that can be done from the comfort of your own home or in your pickup, because a lot of people are happy to provide information on internet forums and Facebook, Instagram, your friends, hunting partners. I've got folks that I'm friends with and also follow that they post a photo as soon as they get done shooting the limit, and I can tell when birds have shown up really quickly. So it helps start putting the pieces together. If all of a sudden you're starting to see, hey, they just shot 3 limits of mallards and they hadn't been shooting anything the last 3 weeks, new birds must have pushed in. So there's a lot of information out there if you're willing to look for it.
And I'll have to say with that, there is some etiquette to whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, that kind of thing. Like, and you guys see it. It's like, just don't come out and ask like, hey, where should I go hunt?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because you will get bombarded. It won't be a good scenario. So do some research, like start to form a plan. And then, hey, if you want to, a guy that's in that area, maybe hit him up, just say, hey, this is what I'm planning to do. What do you think? Versus a blanket statement out there generally doesn't yield very good results.
No, and kind of on that same line, if you're new to the sport, it's pretty intimidating, honestly, to decoys, boats, dogs, field setup, all that is really try to find a mentor that can, that's willing to work with you. Hey, I want to put in the work. How can I help? How can I go scout? Where, do the things that you may not have the monetary assets for currently, but putting in the time and effort. And helping that mentor out and in turn can kind of help you. It's really, I've seen a lot of people struggle and kind of give up on the sport just because it is so daunting, but getting some help from someone that want to share that time in the blind, I think that's the cool thing with waterfowl hunting is just that heritage and blind time with a good friend or a new friend is some of the best times of it. It's not just shooting straps of ducks. So
I've seen some pretty cool posts here lately too, where a guy they'll say, hey, I'm going to go hunt a new area. I'm new to the area. I've got a trailer full of decoys. I'd love to tag along. I mean, it's just different ways to do it instead of just saying, hey, I'm going here. Show me your spots, or where should I go?
yeah.
But you bring up a great point, Ben. Great point.
Yeah. And then, weather and wind, that is some of the most highly critical information, whether you're going to shoot them up or you're going to struggle, just based on what the weather patterns are doing, what the migration's doing. I think half the good waterfowlers are meteorologists as much as anything else, and really trying to hone in on the weather. What does it look like north? Are we going to get a push, and trying to predict that a little bit more and being in tune. So, onX weather is great. The new feature that Dylan was showing us when we were deer hunting about optimal wind, you have these couple spots and like, hey, we got a south wind tomorrow. What does this look like for us? And kind of pull up some of those pockets that you've already got marked off in the timber, and hey, this is going to shoot good tomorrow with the weather forecast. The other one that I use a lot, there's an app called Ventusky or Windy, and that shows wind vectors. It's a really good app to really dial in exactly what those wind forecasts and when it's going to change. It seems to be a fairly accurate, especially for us on the coast side of it.
Yeah.
Pretty good tool.
If there's people on here that are new, like in terms of weather, like you said, it's a huge, right? It can make or break a hunt. Explain like what ideal conditions, like what would be ideal conditions and what would be like just extremely poor conditions.
Okay. Myself, like the best conditions I could find would be the front of a storm or a big weather change. Hopefully it's a cold front. Myself, I'd like to see cold, clear, sunny with north winds. That's a pretty good migration indicator, especially if you have full moon. But also, I mean, some of the nastiest weather out there for us is some of our best hunting. So whether it be a big rainstorm or any type of big weather event. On the flip side, if you're coming out of a long cold spell, a big warm up, we call them Chinooks here. We'll get a big southwesterly warm up. All of a sudden, these bodies of water that have been froze up, or food that has been unable for the birds to access, now that when it warms up, it thaws out. All of a sudden, that kind of puts them into a frenzy as well. I hate stale weather. Stale weather to me is probably the worst. A high of 45, a low of 38, no wind,
high gray,
high clouds. Yeah, it's just not optimal at all. Because a lot of times birds go to night feeding, or they'll just fly off the refuge, a few hundred yards and go feed in the grass. Just not optimal.
Yep. Yeah, I think, and then that also for us, dictates a lot of river levels. Are we getting the rain to raise the water and flood fresh feed? So keeping an eye on those water levels. It also dictates some of the access you're going to be able to get into. So all of a sudden, it's been pounded for the last 2-3 weeks at this level. We got a big bump. and opens up some more opportunities to get in there a little bit deeper, a little bit further away from the crowds. So
On the wind thing, Cody and I learned a pretty valuable lesson this last trip to Canada, and we had to learn it the hard way. We were hunting two major roosts, huge bodies of water, and if the wind was coming out of the north, they would leave into the wind. All those geese would leave into the wind. If it shifted to the east, then they would leave into that wind. Well, we had scouted in the morning, had a hard east wind, and it shifted north, and so we went on our morning scout. I don't know, 10% of the birds came out,
Yep.
and the rest of them we watched all go out north. So if you're in an area where they seem to do that, they don't do it so much here at home.
no,
But there they did. I mean, they wanted to leave into the wind every single time. So
yeah. And then for us on the coastal side of life, tides, trying to figure out, at daylight, what is it going to be? Sometimes those tides are going to dictate, like, hey, no, we're not going to shoot a duck till 10 o'clock. We don't need to be down there at 4 in the morning and get in there in the dark. And tides are tricky. There's definitely a safety concern there, and being really cognitive of where to be at what parts of the tides. I've been stuck high and dry for a 6-hour cycle, waiting for some water. So learn my lesson a little bit the hard way on that. But definitely, it's another factor to know where those birds are moving in those coastal estuaries at what part of the tide. So finding those marks on an incoming tide, and they like to be up here in the high tide. You might see them there and then try to go hunt it and not look at the tide and realize you're low slack and you're not going to shoot a bird. So
quick safety tip too: if you're hunting a tidal area or area that the river or the water fluctuates a lot, if you're not familiar with it, I myself, I don't leave till first light, just because there could be debris in the rivers, there could be deadheads, there could be sandbars you don't know of. I'd rather miss the first half hour and get out there safe.
for sure,
not deal with that. So.
Yep.
Moon phase,
yeah, moon phase is one. Eric touched on it earlier. You get a big north wind, a full moon. It's perfect conditions for with a cold snap migration, and they're going to travel all night, fly all night. So those are definitely things to be cognitive of what's going on.
Same thing with night feeding. If it's stale, you have a full moon, it's bright out. All of a sudden, these birds will spend the entire night in the field feeding, and then during the day, it's dead.
Yep.
So, I like to say there's three types of locations you can hunt. there's spots that they want to be. That's hunting the X. There's spots they don't mind being. That's hunting traffic. And then there's spots they don't want to be, and that's hunting the dead hole. And you'll see what I mean. The more you hunt, you'll find those spots. Myself, more often than not, I prefer to hunt traffic. We're fortunate we get to hunt the X quite a bit, but at the same time, I don't mind being. When I say traffic, I don't mind being between point A and point B. Like, so they're leaving the roost, going to a feed. I don't mind being between those two spots and running traffic on those birds going back and forth. So that's probably, I would say, 75% of the time what we're hunting.
Yeah,
hunting traffic.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of dictates, especially on the duck side of life, traffic's good. Small geese traffic can be really good. Honkers get a little bit, shooting the big Tonys, they're a little bit more destination heavy. So depending, but yeah.
When it comes to hunting a dead hole as well, like say you're going into a weekend, you've got a weekend to hunt, you got a Friday afternoon to scout, and you don't find anything. Myself, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I'd rather spend another day scouting, trying to find a good hunt for Sunday, than hunting a dead hole 2 days in a row. So we'll do that sometimes. If we have nothing going into a Saturday or going into a first day of a trip, instead of getting into a bad pattern of like all of a sudden we're hunting mornings and scouting afternoons, but we don't have anything, we'll take a morning off and really put ourselves in a good position, hopefully for the rest of the trip, for the rest of the weekend, by doing more scouting.
Yep.
So don't be afraid to move.
Yeah, and with that too is like I've found that there's certain times I say, hey, I've e-scouted this area, it looks really good. I get there, drive around, put on hundreds of miles, and it's like, man, there just aren't that many birds here. So that's why, like, when I schedule like hotel rooms, for example, like I honestly I try to stay away from Airbnbs where you're locked in, because there's been times where I started a trip and ended a trip 300 or 400 miles away just because there aren't birds. So that ability to stay mobile, to your point of, don't be afraid to move, whether that's 10 miles or whether that's 200 miles.
Yep.
It's hard to hunt birds that aren't there.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we chose our spot. We've done our scouting. We figured out our wind, our weather. This is hopefully going to be the spot. Now what? Now what are we doing? What's the first thing we're trying to put together?
No, we talked about early on transportation, how we getting in there, where we parking the rigs, really trying to dial that uh, in that scouting process before the morning too, and also in the hide side of it. You're not trying to with the new rangefinder mode. What you can do, shoot a range on it. You got a field edge, and you're saying, okay, there's a good tree right there. There's a good cluster of brush. Where is that at? Get a bearing. Go to the rangefinder mode. Mark that waypoint out. You may not see that, on the aerial side of it, the satellite imagery. So you got a good spot to head out in the dark and figure that where you need to be in that hide. And the hide is king, over decoy spreads, over anything else. I think number one thing, if you cut shortcuts on the hide, you're going to suffer immensely. So it doesn't matter how big your spread is. If they're picking you apart and seeing you, they aren't going to work.
So, and to that point, are you talk about picking and choosing, like let's say in a field hunting situation, are you foregoing some fields even though they might be loaded because of the hide?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got fields. Cody lives in an area, especially. I'm fairly fortunate. Most of the areas around here are fairly brushy. I mean, we can usually put them together.
Dirty fields, we like to call them.
Dirty fields. Cody lives in an area that there are spots. He's like, I could drive by and show you hundreds of honkers. He's like, there's absolutely. He's like, I've tried everything I could think of.
Tried.
No way to hunt.
Yeah, laying in the spread, and we end up for the most part hunting edges. It's like, okay, there's a pile of birds, but they're 300 yards off the fence. I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to go to where the hide is and pull those birds over. A lot of times you can make that happen, especially in these smaller fields. When you start getting a big section field or something like that, you might struggle in there and you want to be as close as you can. But we end up hunting edges, staying away from tree lines as much as you can. If there's a big timber line or anything like that, try to minimize that. If there's a gap in the trees, 100 yards, a lot of times if you're watching that field, those birds will fly over those gaps, over to that, over choosing to go over those tree lines. So pay attention to that on the tree line side of it.
And we tried to put this together too, to where it's like this is literally the recipe of how we assess a field or how we assess a hunt, whether it be a duck or goose hunt. That's the first two things we look at is like how are we getting there? What do we need to get in there? Is it a cart, four wheeler? Can we drive in? Is it a boat? And then how are we going to hide there once we get there, and then pick out like the blind style, right? If we're hunting out an A-frame or a panel style blind, or if we're going to be in the middle of the field, we should probably try to do a layout. If you're fortunate to have a pit in a field, we're going to have a pit, or I've got a few box blinds we can hunt in more of our, private land type stuff. And then a lot of times stick built blinds.
Yeah, natural vegetation. We hunt there's a river system here that we'll hunt a lot of times and use the boat as transport. And then you literally cut a couple willows, cut some grass, and dig out a little hole inside that timber edge type stuff. So natural cover is good. And two, think about who you're hunting with. If you're taking your father, your grandpa out, you got an older person. A lot of times those A-frames is going to be, or a panel blind style is going to be a lot more comfortable for them to access to stand up and shoot over a layout blind. Layouts for us anymore. Layouts are about the last choice that we have. But we'll a lot of times hunt panel blinds, brush them in. Top covers the other side of it to look at. You can have this beautiful front. Those birds fly over the top. They've either got a big black hole created from there, so trying to get as much cover over the top. Sun at your back, where when you're setting that up, what's the sunrise looking like? One thing is it's hard to shoot into the sun, and for two, those birds really, with their sun at their back, they're working downwind that way, have an opportunity to really pick you apart. So.
On decoys, match the hatch. Go with what you've seen. If I can, I'll try on full bodies as many times as I can. But there's times where we can't get a lot of full bodies in the field, or we need to throw a bigger spread, and we'll go with socks for snow geese. Or on ducks, if a big river system, we might go more Canada goose decoys just so that we show up, and fewer ducks. But it really, where you're hunting dictates what you bring in for decoys and how many you need. Anymore, I'd rather put more time into my hide and fewer high quality decoys than a huge spread. I put this in dogs. Don't ever assume. And this kind of comes into also like, not on say hunter ethics, but just also like if you're invited to a spot, I say don't ever assume. Some guys just like bring their dogs. Always ask, if you're on the invite, or at least talk amongst your hunt partners. Who's bringing dogs? Do they hunt well together? How are we going to hide them? How are we going to hunt them? Dogs are such a fun part of what we do, but at the same time, um, don't ever want to assume.
No,
Don't ever
I
want
think
to
that's
assume.
a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
Is yeah, when in doubt, leave them out.
Yeah.
So uh, local rules, laws, right? If you're hopping from state to state, we have in the Pacific Northwest, we have a Northwest goose. It's a totally different test, and you have to have certification to hunt that zone. So be paying attention to the regs. What is the bag limit? What's the possession limit? We're big too on bring your own strap. You're not party hunting. Shoot your own birds. You keep track of those birds. So paying attention to that as well. So
Big one's also like entry hours. Different wildlife areas, different public areas. Some you can go in the night before and camp out on your spot. Some you can't go in until 4 a.m. Some it's an hour and a half before shooting time. So just look up those local rules and regs and try to find out as much info as you can.
yep.
All right, the gear you need to be successful. If you like waterfowl hunting, I hope you like gear because it's a gear intense sport.
Yeah. So a lot of times around here, we're not able to drive in. We're on the west side, a little muddy. So we've engineered some carts, 4-wheel carts that can carry 10 dozen full bodies, blinds, guns, the whole deal. And they push in, and that works really well for us. We've used them in some wildlife areas where non-motorized travel, is required. So instead of trying to sling a bag of decoys over your back, blind bag, a strap of birds, gun, all that. You have I've seen all types. You can go and literally buy a wheelbarrow type cart. Whatever you can get the tool to get the stuff out there, do it. Sleds are another one.
Side by sides, I've got a side by side with an aluminum trailer. Take the side by side off the trailer, hook the aluminum trailer up to the side by side. It's a great way to get into fields, especially if they're muddy and a lot of places they'll still let you go in just as long as you don't leave any trace. That's a big one. But on foot, we'll go on foot. We don't do too much of the decoy bags anymore. But we'll take carts or sleds.
Yep.
That's a big one. And then boats, whether it be a boat with motor or a marsh boat, some way of getting into these spots that makes it a little bit easier on you. You can get more gear in and out. But the leave no trace is a big deal, especially if you're hunting private property. These landowners, they want you to take care of it. They don't want you leaving trash in the field. I got into a soft spot up in Canada and did our best to get out of there without making a big mess. But a bottle of booze went a long ways. Went over there, told them, hey, sorry, got stuck, and they were totally fine with it. But it just I want to leave it so the next guy that goes out there to go ask permission, they're not like, oh, well, this guy came in and trashed my field, and I don't let anybody hunt anymore. I'm always trying to think about the next guys that might be going.
Yeah, and picking up shells, picking up wads, do your best to get them all. So.
As far as blinds, we were talking about it briefly. As far as layout blinds and A-frames, panels, I'd say 9 times out of 10 we're hunting panel blinds anymore. Panels are an A-frame style blind. Layouts definitely have their place. They're not as comfortable to hunt out of, but you can get into some pretty sneaky spots with them. So we have layout blinds as well.
Backboards are the other one.
Backboards,
laying in the spread. Generally, that's more in a shooting snows. So big spread stuff.
If someone's
just laying in whites on that.
Generally, yep. Ghillie blankets, depending, like in a corn, we'll ghillie blanket and maybe have a white hoodie on or something, and still using the tall socks for cover, right? And getting those tied over the top of you. Sometimes you get tangled up pulling up to shoot, but definitely try to get as much coverage as you can vertically.
If you're new to waterfowl hunting though, and you're trying to find, what's the most bang for your buck, most cost effective, I would probably say a panel style blind or A-frame, because you can just use it in so many different situations, and they're pretty packable.
Yep, go in with a couple buddies and buy a set. So, and I think that's one, building a spread, building blinds. You got a good group of 2 or 3 guys come together, and kind of match the resources instead of like everyone trying to go out and buy everything. Like, hey, this year I'm going to buy a set of panels. I'm going to get another 2 dozen full body honker decoys. We'll plan and hunt and working that out. So
on the decoy side of thing, full bodies are great. I love using them, but you come down to the transportation side of it. You got to have a place to store them, and you got to be able to get them in and out of the field. So that's something we're always cognizant of and aware of. It's like, okay, if we want to throw a big spread, how are we going to get them in and out of the field? On floaters, I mean, there's so many good floaters on the market anymore. I always say buy the best decoys you can afford, but we run a lot of floater goose decoys.
Yeah, that's one too, and even especially big bodies of water using honker floaters. I'd rather go in with 4 dozen honker floaters and a dozen or 2 dozen ducks. For one, it looks something different. It's not a 6 dozen duck spread that everyone's got or 4 dozen duck decoys. It gives a big imprint. Those birds can lock in and see it from a long way away. And then field hunting or edge hunting, silhouettes are a good volumizer, right? Maybe you got some full bodies, but if you want to throw a bigger spread, you can do it really quick and effectively with silhouettes.
We started running silhouettes in our snow goose spread, and it's amazing what 10 dozen silhouettes added to the spread. Yeah, it looked like it was big.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say another thing on that is if you're budget conscious, you don't have to go necessarily buy new, right? Go on Facebook Marketplace, right? Like there are people getting out of it, in and out of it all the time. So that's been a great resource to find some deals on some lightly used decoys.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Socks are a great decoy as well, especially if you're hunting an area that has pretty consistent wind. We're not as fortunate on this side of the state where we live. If you go more east, they get a more consistent wind, I would say.
Yeah.
But we've had great success over socks for snow geese and for Canadas.
Yeah. Yep. Shooting little geese too.
All right. One of the more important parts of a decoy spread anymore, I mean, something that I would put as much importance on motion in your spread as I would calling.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think for us, Oregon, Washington, we can't use any electronic decoys. So we've got, for us, it's a decoy dancer for basically your Mojo spinner decoy. It's hand operated, so you got a pull string on it, spins the wings. I like it. You have really good control with it. Whether watching birds react, hitting it, and then maybe they're making that turn. You just stop. Depending, sometimes you'll spin them all the way in. They also make a floating stand, so it's got 3 decoys on this floating stand. Would also work good for if you're in a place that you can hunt with electronic decoys. To get that, if you're in deep water, you can set that on the Mojo on there and use that for suspending that spinner wing decoy. But Water Motion Duck's another company that makes a really good spreader for a jerk rig that gives good motion. Even especially if you're just using small spread, I've got one that actually mounts 7 decoys in a spread that's probably like 8 to 9 feet wide. So you can just hunt all motion. So small spread.
Spinning wings in a lot of our water sets, but in fields are super important.
Yeah.
And water motion is probably the most important, I would say, as far as you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And I just am constantly reminded like the power of a jerk string, right? You can have agitators, pulsators, doodads like that are all going to cost you money, but a dang jerk string is worth its weight in gold, especially on those calm days. Like I would take 6 decoys and a jerk string over a giant spread.
And you can make one for less than $20. I mean,
bungee cord and decoy string.
Exactly.
Yeah, bungee, and there you go.
Sock style decoys, we talked about that, but we'll add some socks into full body spreads every once in a while if there's a lot of wind, just to get that motion. And then, man, the rabbit hole of flyers and vortex machines and clone. I mean, there's so many awesome motion decoys on the market. We use clones and we use the snowbots up in Canada on snows, and it was amazing to see how well they worked. And then some days actually we turned them off.
Yep.
So I mean, you kind of got to let the birds tell you what they want to see. But there was definitely days that they ate them up, and then almost go ahead.
I was just saying, talk about like a mixed spread. You're up in Canada or you're hunting a honker duck setup or snows, ducks, honkers. Like that was one thing I ran into a lot especially up in Canada is like, all right, well, should I run clones? Should I run the vortex? Like how does that thought process break down for you guys?
If we're approaching a hunt and it's primarily a snow feed, then I'm going to set myself up to primarily hunt snows and then have spinners out for ducks on a remote that I can turn on and off. If I'm hunting a dark feed with some snows mixed in, I'm going to set up for darks and ducks and then have a few snow goose decoys mixed in to hopefully attract those snows. But darks, especially, we have had very mixed success hunting over a big snow goose spread and killing darks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is definitely a challenge there. I think ducks are going to come to either one, generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, with spinners or motion. And literally, I think generally speaking, we don't ever really set any duck decoys other than spinners or decoy dancer if
Yeah.
we're hunting snows in the field. Like they're going to come to that big spread and then see that tight spin and wing and pull in there. Same goes on a dark spread. So
And I think it's safe to say also when it comes to using motion decoys, like say Vortex or using the clones or Snowbots, whatever you're using. That first half hour to 45 minutes is going to tell you everything you need to know for the day as far as how those birds are going to work to it. And if all of a sudden they're coming in, they're locked up at 80 yards and they flare off of that motion decoy, we'll turn it off and put it away just because like okay today they don't want to see it. And then some days the more you put out the better it gets.
and then like you said is making those adjustments, right? Don't be like, I want this to work. I'm gonna just keep driving it home, and by the end of the day, you burn through all the birds and didn't get the shooting that you wanted. Like I said, same goes even on the calling side of it. We'll touch on too.
Yeah.
So
And then a goose flag. We use goose flags all the time for both snows and for Canadas, depending on our set. We won't use them as much on an edge hide because if we're off the decoys, we don't want them looking at the blind, so we won't flag. But if we're in the set, we use flags a lot.
yeah, literally we've had them to dang near shooting range
Mm-hmm.
flagging. So
Yeah, using motion to conceal yourself. That's another one. That's using socks. I mean, that's one of the beauties of using socks is you can use them in a lot of different ways, and they're super easy to put out and take down. So
and
Yeah,
transport, you don't need a giant trailer to throw a big spread.
and the other thing that's nice, and I'm sure you guys have seen it, but when you're coming up to shoot out of the sock spread, you're laying in whites or whatever, you'll get an extra 5-6 seconds before they even know what's going on versus, layout blinds or a panel blind where you throw the door open. I mean, they know the gig is up really fast, but if you're hunting the socks, they're moving. It seems like you just get an extra opportunity, extra few seconds to get some shots off while they're not flaring.
yeah, absolutely.
What was keep them guessing?
Oh,
I see that.
yeah. So I like to use, especially, well, if we're on the edge, I kind of talk about that. I like to keep them focused in the decoys and not on us in the blind. But a lot of times, duck hunting is if we're using our spinner, I'm using it almost like a flag because we use a pull string. I'll flash it at them on the corners, kind of wingtips and tail feathers, and keep them guessing as far as where it's coming from. And then once they're fixed on it, I want them to land, as close as possible to the motion decoy. It keeps them from looking at the blind. It keeps them off of your hide. So you can use motion to keep them occupied.
Yeah.
All right. So now we've gotten to my favorite part of the hunt.
Yeah.
Calling. Calling's one of those things that's probably one of the major reasons why I love waterfowl hunting so much is that aspect of it. And whether you're a beginner or advanced, I mean, you'll find enjoyment out of it no matter what. I'm going to talk about right now like different types of calls. We're not going to get into like different call sequences so much. We could talk about that for hours, but the different types of duck calls and why we use them, when we use them. There's single read and double read duck calls. Both have their advantages. I wouldn't say so much disadvantages, but like for a double read, they're a lot easier to run. A lot of the tone is built into the call, not as technical. Great call for beginners to get going on. And then a single read is just going to be more versatile, sometimes more volume, and get a little bit wider range of notes.
Yep.
Honestly, when it comes to choosing a duck call, choose the one that fits you the best. I mean, we're going to be kind of biased. We make duck and goose calls. I like the ones we make, but don't get hung up on using a certain brand. I mean, find the one that fits you the best, that you enjoy using, and is comfortable for use.
Yeah, and then material, right? Whether it's a polycarb call, that sound tones, it's going to be economical. Great start, learn through, and as you advance is where you might step into more of in a wood call or wood acrylic or straight just all acrylic blend. Those That's a denser material, has generally more volume, more control, better tone out of it. So it's a machine, so you're going to pay more money, but keep care of it. It'll last a lifetime.
Mhm.
So
On the goose call side of life, there's two different styles. There's a short reed goose call and a flute style call. And the flute style call was widely popular forever because the short reed hadn't been really created or invented yet. Flutes definitely still have their place. There's some awesome flutes in the market. I enjoy blowing them. They have a unique sound.
yeah,
Um, they're much different as far as how you blow them than a short reed, so they don't really go hand in hand. Someone that can blow a flute might not be able to blow a short reed, or vice versa. A short reed goose call is hands down the most popular now in the market. You can buy them polycarb, wood, acrylic, and there's the range of notes and the sounds you can make and the volume you can get out of them. It just doesn't really even compare to a flute.
yep,
So,
yep.
myself, I would recommend learn how to blow a short reed goose call, and yeah,
And don't just practice when you're in the blind. I think that's a lot of people pick up the calls. I haven't blown them since last season, and they're like, "Whoa, yeah, a little rough."
Mhm.
And you always got your buddy that's just like thinks he should be at Worlds and probably should just put that call away. So don't be that guy. Know your kind of limitations and your skill sets there, and where you can do. And the big thing is practice. Having it in your truck while you're driving along. Good time. Go out in the shop. Go out in the garage. Irritate the dog out there and get them excited. But spend some time behind the call. And there's a lot of information out there now on YouTube on calling tutorials, what sounds to look for. And the basis is figuring out how to blow it. The real art to calling is knowing what to blow and when, and reading those birds and how they react. So
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point about in terms of picking the call that fits best for you. And I see that more so with short reed goose calls than with duck calls, right? Because some companies they tune them super light, and that's what they like. And like there's certain calls that I can blow them, but it just doesn't jive with mine. Whether they don't take enough back pressure, too little. So as you work up maybe through that polycarb up to an acrylic, because man, I mean, like that's an investment, right? I mean, they cost a lot of money to make, and it's a piece of art. So before you go off and just spend money because so and so said buy this call, like yeah, try them out, right? Like work your way up, and yeah.
yeah, sportsman shows are great opportunities to go and shop several brands, several different models, kind of get through a tune and be like, hey, I blow less air. Can you tune this thing lighter for me? As you get into it too, you'll learn how to tune them and figuring out what you like. So
when it comes to calling, whether it be ducks or geese, there's three distinct styles, or styles are different ways of communicating with birds. One is power calling, which power calling really it depends on the area you're hunting and the birds you're hunting, but it can be very very effective. And that is you're just creating not necessarily a wall of sound, but a realistic representation of a lot of birds making a lot of sound, right? And birds are attracted to that, whether it be in a feeding scenario or whether it be you're trying to look like the refuge on a big river system or a body of water. Myself on public areas, I call quite a bit because I want to keep their attention, right? I want to keep them looking at my decoy spread rather than the guy 300 yards down the way from me. So we do a lot of calling. The other one would be finesse style, and I've always said finesse style is more or less every time you make a sound, you're looking to get a reaction out of a bird. So if I'm blowing a 5 to 7 note greeting on a duck call, I'm doing that because I'm trying to get that bird to make a turn or try to get his attention, and then I put the call away until I need to do it again. And that's more or less your finesse style. So
calling them on the corners.
call them on the corners, less calling, but each note or each sound you make, you're looking for a reaction, and then no calling. And I do a lot of no calling. I don't know
Yeah.
how many times it's like, hey guys, they're not liking it for whatever reason. They're highly pressured or they don't want to hear the call that day. So we'll let the decoys do the work, and hopefully our scouting and our hide is dialed in because all they're doing is they're looking for the decoys and they're coming right in.
And generally that's like if you're in the spot they want to be,
Mm-hmm.
it's your job not to mess it up, right? So you know, we're power calling, like I said, you're more in that traffic zone. You're trying to get their attention. If you're in the X, uh, you can mess it up by calling too much on that, especially honkers, big honkers. You know.
One of the biggest mistakes I see, and I see it when some of my best friends and hunt partners that are great callers, you see birds, all of a sudden they kind of catch you and they're coming, they're locked up. The first thing they do is pick up their call and start calling. And I'm like, why? They're already doing exactly what we want them to do. All I'm going to do is probably screw it up or no reaction at all. So there's
Yeah.
no reason to call.
Yep.
If they're doing what we want them to do and they're coming to the decoys, let them come and see what they do.
And to your earlier point about the same thing with motion decoys, you said it there, like you don't go into a hunt, right, saying, well, I'm going to power call today. Let the birds tell you what they want, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Learning to read birds is an art form, but it's one of those things. The more time you spend in the blind watching them and seeing how they react and how they work decoys and how they work live birds at the same time, it teaches you everything you need to know. So
Yep.
that kind of dovetails into let the birds, the conditions, the pressure dictate those daily adjustments. And the more you do it, the more you'll start to figure it out quicker in each hunt. And that's all the fun of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Weather conditions play a huge factor. Wind, if it's super windy, you know your sound isn't going to travel as far, so you're going to have to use a higher pitch or a louder call for them to hear it. Fog is a tough one. There's times in the fog for ducks that I'll kind of keep like a rolling chatter going, just so that birds can hear that we're in the area. But at the same time, I've been in fog situations where that sound bounces off the fog and it just sounds so odd to them that no calling, helped out more than that. And then snow and rain, the ceiling, that's something we deal with all the time.
Yeah.
High ceiling, low ceiling.
And to open water timber, if you're hearing an echo, generally I don't like to call too much. If you can hear an echo, keep that to a minimal. So.
And hunting pressure, if birds are getting hunted hard and they're stale, they're not going to want to hear as much calling. They're kind of spooked the moment they get up off the water. So just got to kind of see what's happening around you, how many gunshots you're hearing, how birds are reacting. And I go right back to that less is more. I don't know how many times I've sat there and just kept the blind door shut and watched them come in and do that.
Well, awesome. I think unless you guys have anything to touch on, I think that kind of ends our regular.
I do have one thing we didn't talk about is like the art of the shot call. If you're running this hunt, hey, you kind of are leading that. Two things, right? I always do a safety talk in the morning, especially if you're hunting with some new guys, or new buddies, new one on the blind, safety's on, all that side of it. When, hey, I'm dictated to call the shot, so don't pop up and shoot till we're ready. And I've learned this especially from Eric. You call the shot where you want them to be versus where they're, anticipating that, because it's going to take you several seconds to sit up, jump up. You call the shot, they're down, especially ducks, right? They're coming fast, and you call the shot when they're centered up right here in front of us, and they're already making that pass out of there. By the time you get up, you've got a 40-yarder on your second shot. Call that shot in anticipation. By the time you're up and ready to go, now they're in the zone there. So it's definitely an art. For me in Canada this year, I was filming all day, and Strand's like, hey, your turn to jump in here. And I was so stressed out because we had 50 ducks coming in. We got a flock of 200 snows. And finally, I just was enjoying the show and looked down the blind. My buddy Brent's like, are we shooting today, or are we just in observer mode? But it is definitely like, it can make or break a hunt, especially when you're on a small feed or something hunting honkers. Making that shot call is critical, and take notes, learn from your mistakes. When you made a bad call, think about what you could have done different there. So.
So we'll answer some questions here in a second, but again, if you're elite members out there, you get a great deal on a lot of the born and raised, whether it's meat bags, calls, all your gear. So if you're an onX elite member, you get exclusive access, 20% off of all this stuff. So that's a great deal. If you want to buy a new call, whatever, again, we're going to do, we've got a giveaway. We've got the Game Changer, as well as some onX swag. So be sure to click that link that we will post again in the chat. If you want to sign up, you might as well. You're here. You can walk away with a new collar, some swag. But we've got some great questions here. in the last little bit. So we'll break into that right now. First one that we didn't really touch on, but let's talk a little bit about shot size, choke selection. What are you guys shooting? I know that can vary, but just give us a little breakdown on what that looks like.
Yeah, and Cody and I think our answer is going to be fairly similar. We're shooting Apex ammunition right now. I've been shooting that for actually quite a while. Primarily steel. We do shoot some business stuff, but myself, I kind of get in my own head. I like to shoot the same ammo, same speed, same shot size all season long. Because kind of once you get in that zone, it's I've heard a lot. I've guided for years. I had a lot of clients say, "Hey, what should I bring tomorrow? Should I bring this or bring that?" Or "Hey, I got different shells, so I'm mixing it up." I'm like, each shell is going to shoot differently out of your gun at different speeds and different patterns. So myself, I like to shoot a size 2 or size 3 for ducks, going 1450 per second, 1450 feet per second, and I shoot that all season. And the only thing I'll change is if I'm hunting big geese, I'll go to BBs at the same speed, so that my leads don't change. And then I shoot a couple different types of chokes. I shoot a pattern master. I shoot a wad wizard. I've got a Rob Roberts, but those stay in each gun, and I don't change them around. I like a full choke myself.
Yeah, and I last year learned my lesson. Kind of, I was jumping back and forth between a 20 gauge, 12 gauge, and the 20 gauge I was shooting 1250, and then on my 12 gauge shooting 1450, and it was a brutal lesson for me. So I'm really diving into that, staying consistent. And if you can, try to get a case or two ahead of season, so you're not scrambling trying to find shells when everyone else is trying to find shells. Try to stay ahead of that curve, save up through the summertime, and get a case in July or August, and have that ready to go. And I like that 1450 we're shooting is an ounce and a quarter, versus an ounce and an eighth at 1500 or 1550. Some of the others, it packs a punch. So with a good pattern on it, it's pretty deadly.
If you're ever wondering about your pattern, go pattern your shotgun. Please go pattern your shotgun, because there's a lot of times I've seen like the patterns are awful. So
And not even if you're interested, just do it, right? Because
yeah, exactly.
And then this kind of a caveat into this. We had a question where it's saying like when we talk about when what is means like when the birds are working well versus when they're not working well, right? Like let the birds dictate what happens. Like what does it look like? In my kind of the caveat to that was, well, if the birds are doing it right, it doesn't matter what you're shooting. You could be shooting steel number sevens, right? So what is it? What is working look like for you, if that makes sense? Like what are the birds doing right?
When things are working right and when birds are working right, it means to me we have control, right? Once we have that bird's attention and they're working our decoy spread, that I don't have to worry about them, sliding off and landing at 80 yards or sliding off or landing short. It means that those birds are consistently coming in. For us, it's at 15, 20 yards. I mean, that's tricking them. I want them feet down, landing the decoys right in front of us, and that means things are going right. Now, when they aren't, it's like you hit a bird and it makes one pass, and then all of a sudden it drifts off, and you got to call hard to try to bring them back, and they make four more circles, and they drift off, or they just fly right by you and never stop. But you can tell birds, especially when it's stale, like all of a sudden these ducks are hanging up at 40 yards, and they're just circling and circling and circling, and like a pintail is a prime example. Like a lot of times pintails, their first pass is their best pass.
Yeah.
I mean, they come in and just dive bomb you in there 15, 20 yards, and then boom, they're gone. So, but yeah, no, when they're working right, it's you have control.
Yep. And that is, you kind of mentioned birds. Duck identification, goose identification is key. Spend a lot of time looking, make notes. For out here, we're one pintail. I think federally one pintail. And hen pintails are notorious for dive bombing in the decoys. And early morning, pay attention to what you're pulling the trigger on, and don't just pull the trigger and hope for the best in that scenario. And a lot of practice, right? Don't just pick up your shotgun and hope to go shoot a duck. Spend some time sporting clays, anything that you can, getting time behind your gun. Familiarity of it goes a long way. So,
this is an interesting one that I'd love to know the answer. What's a general rule of thumb for kind of birds activity when it comes to tides?
Okay, that's a great question. Most of the time, as the water moves in, so when the water's at low tide, they're going to be on a sandbar, gravel bar, low water situation, mud flat, where they're maybe picking at, little microinvertebrates or seeds or whatnot, and they're feeding out there. As soon as the water moves in and starts to cover up those areas that they're loafing on or resting on, they all of a sudden have to move. And so we usually hunt incoming tides. We'll go in at the bottom of a tide, set up, and then hunt the incoming. And if we're in the right spot, that first 2 hours of incoming tide, we'll get them. And that's what moves it. It's basically moving those birds as the water moves in. It covers up islands. It covers up everything.
Yep, and generally that is in that scenario where the feed's going to be, where they need to go to feed. So, yeah, tidal. I'll be the first one to admit I've spent a lot of time in the tide, and I've got my butt kicked more often times than not. And it's definitely a long run of trying to figure it out, taking notes, making waypoints. A lot of times scouting, I'll just take the boat out and okay, I'm going to go cruise this at incoming tide from the first half or the second half of it, just to watch what the birds are doing, trafficking versus just going out and hoping for the best of it. And tide. The other tidal thing is you got to move your decoys a lot. A lot of times it's like sometimes it's 15, 20 minutes. You're out moving, pulling them in, or moving them out if it is on the outgo. So.
Just for reference, there's areas we hunt where it could be a 0 low tide and an 8-foot high tide. So you've got 8 feet of water moving in about 6 hours. So a lot changes in that 6 hours.
Interesting, very interesting. Another good one is say you have a finite amount of money, which most of us do, right? You're building we'll do a field spread and a water spread. Obviously this varies by budget, but you're getting into field hunting. What do you need to be viable for, say, the first year? What does that look like?
You think like for Canada geese?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So for Canada geese, first thing I look at is my blind. So myself, best bang for the buck, most versatile. I'm gonna get panel blinds just because they're super easy to pack in and out, or A-frames. I can hunt them either in the field if it's a dirty field, or I can hunt on an edge. So that's what I'm gonna go for a blind. And then for decoys, I'm gonna go with probably the best full bodies I can get, and maybe 5 dozen or so, 10 dozen silhouettes just to fill in.
But yeah, I mean, I've shot a lot of honkers over seven full bodies, 9, 12, some small spread late in the season. I've used 4. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that the quantity of that, but having the most realistic full body is definitely it seems to play.
And then a goose flag. A goose flag for motion is a great tool, and you can get one for $20.
Yep.
So then on the water side, a little less investment than maybe the honkers or whatnot. So what would be your recommendation on that end?
I'd probably do the same thing on a blind, just because it's very versatile. If you need to have a blind, or maybe you're on a public area where there's you can do a stick built blind, but I do the same for a blind. And then as far as floater decoys, I would probably go 1 or 2 dozen goose floaters and 2 to 3 dozen duck decoys. Yep. And then I'd go with a spinner and a good jerk rig.
Yep. Mallards mix. What does that look like?
For us, mallards, widgeon, maybe pintail, but I mean a lot of times mallards will decoy just about anything. But we do have a lot of widgeon out here, so we have widgeon decoys as well.
Yep.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah, and spend the motion. I mean, I would say if you had to choose, like, okay, I can get a spinner or I can get another dozen duck decoys. I'd say a spinner is probably going to be a more aptitude investment. So
yeah, blind, decoys, motion. Those are the 3 things you guys got to have.
Awesome. We will wrap it up here with this question. When you're e-scouting a new area, you're looking at a new lake to hunt or something like that, river system. What features stand out for you of those systems, those lakes that say, hey, this looks like it'd be a good spot from an e-scouting perspective?
I'm looking for, if we're hunting like a lake or marsh, I'm looking for points. I'm looking for points because you're gonna have a lee side on both sides here for wind, so that you can hunt if it's windy. If not, then you've got the best visibility. And ducks and geese tend to usually congregate on points. Sometimes they have like a little sandbar that goes out they might be standing on. But for visibility, that's probably the first one. And then also access, like how am I going to get to it? That's a big one. There might be some spots that, man, that looks awesome, but how in the heck am I going to get out there? So I might try to get as close to a refuge as I can. Say your lake is situated next to a refuge or to a roost area. I want to get as close to that as I can. and in an area that puts me in front of the most, with the best visibility.
Yep, and in talking about access, the harder to access spots generally can be the producer. If it's easy to get to and you're hunting public, there's going to be 6 guys.
Mhm.
5 of the guys are going to go to the easiest. I've got a bag of decoys. I'm going to get there. So the investment of like a marsh boat can help you all of a sudden access stuff that everyone's walking in or waiting, and a little goes a long way, getting a marsh boat and all of a sudden being able to paddle in there, or little Minn Kota, to get back into some spots that no one's hunting, and you can have some phenomenal hunting. So I did see someone ask about longtails versus surface drives. That's one I've never operated a longtail, but I've got a surface drive motor, and the versatility of it. I hunt it in the salt and the tidal stuff. I hunt it in the mud. I've hunted it on big water. I'm a big fan of it. Hunted rivers, running rivers, all that. It's really versatile.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. Where can people follow along on all your adventures this year?
So yeah, if you jump on YouTube, it's the Flyway. We've got that channel. It's all of our waterfowl turkey content lives there. Like I said, we're hunting a couple different countries, 5 states this year, kind of all over the mix. And it goes from walk-in public areas to big water to fields, kind of the whole gambit. So we like the big thing with me with diversity. I think the best part about it is the diversity of it. There's so many different opportunities to go hunt sea ducks, to hunt sheetwater, all the things. And I like to go try new things, go explore. So they're at the Flyway. And then also we have the other channel, Born and Raised Outdoors. It's all of our big game stuff. So stuff leading up to the waterfowl season you can check out there. So
love it. Well, again, guys, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone that's listening tonight, hope you learned something, and thank you for joining our masterclass. So hope you have a successful season and a great evening tonight.
yeah, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.